envision, okay, pockets of agoras start popping up as people realize, hey, my neighbors are living this free life. They're not getting taxed. They're not, being overregulated. Maybe we should join them. And you start to see this activity start to take place around the country, and it starts to parallel the state. And, obviously the longer term vision is eventually we outgrow it, right? The state becomes weaker. But how does that happen? How do we get the pockets to spread? How do we get the message to spread? I believe that one of those tools is what we call freedom cells. And this is something that John and I write about in the new book. I would recommend everybody checking out freedomcells.org. That's CELLS, like the cells in your body. So freedom cells are peer-to-peer decentralized groups for the purpose of mutual aid, for knowledge sharing, for skill sharing, for defense, for growing food. It's an unlimited concept. Essentially, we call for groups of 8 to 10 people, and in the book there's, we talk about why we choose those numbers, but ideally 8 to 10 people who come together for this purpose, right? What freedomcells.org does, it's a network. I don't like to call it a social network because when people hear social network, they think about pictures of people's cats and their food and debates on Facebook. There's none of that on freedomcells.org. Freedomcells.org, similar to Nextdoor, is designed for you to connect with people locally. So when you go on there, you can create a profile of your interests. Hey, I'm a good hunter. I'm good with nuts. I'm good with security culture. Whatever your skills are, whatever your interests are, right? You can create a profile. You can search by other people's skills and by other people's interests. And then you can go up to the map and it'll show you, you can search within 5 miles, 10 miles, 50 miles of you, and it'll show you other people in your area who have joined for the purpose. And we've been touring the country telling people about this website. I've been promoting this concept for 2 years now. And when we first started doing interviews about this and really spreading it, I was contacted by people in Germany, in Brazil, Australia, all over the country who said, hey, we're already doing this. We call it Freedom Hubs or Circles, or we don't have a name for it. The names are irrelevant. I don't really care if you call it Freedom Cells. It's the concept of bringing us together in these small groups to start taking care of each other and building this mutual aid, and also to have this core group of people that you could start practicing counter-economic activity. So our house, the Freethinker House, is basically a space where we can create, our Houston Freedom Cell. And they're all over the place. Since we've been doing the tour, there's now the San Diego Freethinkers. That's what they call their cell. There's the Salt Lake Freedom Hive. They all give each other different names, and it's really cool. But they're based there on freedomcells.org. It's a great way to connect to them. I'll give you some examples of how we use this concept, what we do in our Freedom Cell, and you can kind of get an idea of it. And I want to say this, though, that the concept itself is decentralized. So the examples I'm giving you are just based on our needs, our interests in Houston. Each Freedom Cell is meant to be autonomous and independent. This isn't like each Freedom Cell needs to do this. Your Freedom Cell, your group, your mutual aid support group, whatever you call it, is going to be different based on your needs, your interests, your local environment, your resources, and all those kind of things. So just remember that. But in our group, one of the things that was really important to us is first we wanted to make sure that everybody had an encrypted form of communication. So there are apps like Signal and Wicker, and there's other ways to get them a bit more strong, but these are apps that are meant to allow people to connect, to communicate in an encrypted fashion. And as a journalist, I write a whole lot about surveillance, and I'll tell you, if you don't pay attention, if you haven't paid attention, not only the cell phones in our pockets that are listening to this all the time, but all the things that they're putting into place, they really do freak me out, and privacy is quickly becoming a thing of the past. And we can either acquiesce and just say, well, I guess, that was the thing of the past, we'll just give it up. Or we can actually try to take steps to, at the least on principle, try to save our privacy. And what that means is, why not use an encrypted app, because it doesn't take that much work, and then communicate with that in that fashion. Not necessarily because you have anything to hide or because you're communicating some illegal thing, but on principle, you're protecting your information. You're not saying, I'm just going to throw my hands up and let them take it. You're actually making an effort to protect that information. So we wanted to make sure that everybody in our Freedom Cell, our group of 7 to 8 people, had an encrypted form of communication. We wanted to make sure that everybody in our group had 3 months worth of backup supply of food. And also that everybody had an emergency bag, sometimes known as a bug out bag. Now when I start talking about this preparation, bugging out, people tend to get like the prepper image, right? You're thinking like doomsday preppers, end of the world kind of scenarios. That's not what influenced us at all. For me, personally, my influence for these kind of ideas of preparation comes from my grandmother, who's in her early 80s, and she's grown up on farms her entire life. She has a farm right now in Kentucky. Been such a huge inspiration to me, and all of our ancestors survived so that we could be here by preparing and by thinking about the future. On her farm during the summer, they're baling hay so that when the winter comes and kills all the crops, they can keep their cows alive throughout the winter by feeding them hay. And every weekend she goes out to her garden and she harvests some stuff, and she comes inside with her vegetables and she gets her pressure canner out and she cans a bunch of stuff in mason jars and takes it down to her cellar, because that's what she's done every since she was a little girl. So this is just common practice. It used to be common practice, but along the way, as America and the world got more successful, we gave up a lot of things. We don't all want to be out in the farm 10 and 12 hours of back-breaking labor, right? So life got easier. But perhaps we're starting to realize we went too far in that direction. We gave up some skills that maybe we want to get back. And that's what Freedom Cells for us is about trying to do. So when we're talking about having 3 months worth of backup supply of food, it's just a practical idea. The hurricane just hit Houston, and within hours, all the grocery stores were out of food. They were running out of water everywhere. The gas was running out. And if you haven't even taken the second to think about these things, you might be at the point where your choices are this. Oh, I guess I can go loot and riot because I didn't think ahead, or I can go over here. FEMA has a camp and they tell me all I need to go there is just go with them and they'll have everything my family needs. You know, you might have to face that situation because you didn't think ahead. You didn't listen when your neighbor was like, hey man, we're trying to start this group where we start preparing with each other and coming up with skills and teaching each other knowledge. So it's a practical thing. That's definitely something I would recommend. So encrypted form of communication, 3 months worth of backup supply of food, emergency bag, and this is like, you know, if you need to get the hell out of your house, like have some supplies that you can quickly grab and go. It can also be forms of self-defense. Some groups might be more comfortable with firearms, so they want to make sure that everybody in their group is proficient and safe in the use of firearms. Other groups might just decide to take a self-defense class together, but that would probably be wise. Maybe you want to teach everybody how to know CPR for obvious reasons. Maybe you guys decide to go take a camp out and teach yourself how to build a fire, just basic skills like this. So the idea being that the knowledge and the power is diffused among your group. It's not, I'm not leading the group, it's all of us doing it together. So then if the shit hits the fan, we're not all eating out of your food bag because you're the only one who prepared. You know that you've got 7 other people you can count on who are on the equal playing ground, same footing as you, and it's not just going to be leaning on one person. Or if one person leaves, moves away, gets sick, he's not the only guy who knows how to build a fire, and now the rest of us are screwed. It's the idea that we're sharing that together. There's obviously going to be some, specializing, like if you're the engineer of the group, we might lean on you when it comes to that. Or if you're the architect and we want to build something, we'll probably go to you for your expertise, but still, we are sharing as much knowledge. Another area is permaculture is very important to our group, so we wanted to make sure that we could educate each other about permaculture. So we watched a few permaculture documentaries together. We divided up the topic, like you two take permaculture on land, you two take water, you two take this. Let's come back in 2 weeks and teach each other everything we know, right? So just basic ideas like that, skill sharing, knowledge sharing, preparedness, gardening. It can also be projects, like say your Freedom Cell decides this weekend we're all going to go out and build a garden together. So then, and you document it, you show people like, look what our community group did. We just built this garden, or we just went out and fed these homeless. So people are starting to see like there's value in this concept. They're understanding. I think it's very important to promote it if you think it's valuable. The other thing is, again, it gives you a core group of people to work with. If everybody in your group decided to get a Bitcoin wallet or invest in some kind of cryptocurrency, that gives you 7 to 8 other people that you can at least buy and trade and sell with if you need to. And if you're an artist, an entrepreneur, like it doesn't take anything to say, we accept Bitcoin now, and then you open yourself up to a new market. Whatever your business is, if you make food, if you make art, you sell books, whatever it is, it doesn't take anything to add that to that. And on that note, crypto is a big part of what we're talking about. It's a whole another conversation, so I just kind of touch on it. But for those who are interested in actually getting set up with wallets, that is something that we're doing. And afterwards, I'll send you a couple dollars in Bitcoin. If you want to get a wallet set up tonight, I can help you do that. So all these different forms these ideas are ways for us to empower each other, to have this core group of people to support each other. And again, these are the pockets that I think Conklin is talking about. These are the ways that we start spreading this concept. And freedomcells.org allows us to connect digitally with the goal of actually building these groups in the real world. And we've been seeing it happen. As I said, I've been talking about this for 2 years. The website's been up for a year. When we were on the West Coast tour, the website started crashing because the servers were crashing because we've been getting more and more people. And we just added a new layer of encryption. We're just starting to update it. So I definitely recommend checking out that website if you haven't. I'm sure there's people in Philly who are looking to get connected. And if you don't know some of the people here, the way we see it, when we're on tour, we've had one event where there was only one person that showed up, and we just spent the whole afternoon getting to know him, walking around with him, talking to him. We've had other events where there's 20 or 30 people, right? But the way I feel is you guys are the ones who cared enough to come out here tonight and spend time with us. You were the ones who took the initiative, right? So you're looking around at other people who took the initiative. You probably should start there, because you guys cared enough to come out here for this night. Why not start with those people and see where you can build from there? And also, if you guys are here, we're here to share the message. So just take advantage of being here, network with people, come together. So that's basically what the Freedom Cell concept is. The fullest extension of this is once you've got your core group of 7 to 8 people, each individual will then be encouraged to turn around and start a secondary group. So then you end up with 8 groups of 8 to 10 people spread across one area. You've got 80 to 100 people. Now each of them could be focused on different projects. Again, like maybe one Freedom Cell is like, hey, we're really into gun culture. Another group's like, oh, that's cool, we're gonna just take some self-defense classes. Maybe one group just wants to focus on gardening. You know, that's like their main focus, and so they're just gonna be the go-to group for all the gardening, permaculture stuff. Maybe one group just focuses on the security culture. But together they can come together and form this network for larger projects. And then on a national level, we start thinking, okay, maybe all across the country, all the Freedom Cells, we all go build a garden on the same day or something like that. You know, where we start really taking advantage of this counter network that we're building, and at the same time promoting economic activity that doesn't involve the Federal Reserve note and that's not working within their system. We're going to create something that can parallel them and can compete with them directly. So that's what we've been building in Houston. That's what we've been focusing on. That brings the agorism and the counter economics together. The last concept I'm going to talk to you guys about as I start to wrap up here is what John and I had started to refer to in the last book as holistic activism or holistic anarchism. And when we break that down, the word holism, the philosophy of holism, it simply means to look at something, look at systems in whole parts rather than to break them down individually. So an example of this, probably the most common example, is holistic medicine. You know, when you think about holistic medicine, and again, sticking to the definition of it, it means to look at the whole system. So rather than treating a symptom, you know, prescribing you a medicine for like, okay, I'm coughing, okay, give you some medicine. You look at what is the root cause, where is that coming from? Look at the whole system, right? Holistic ecology is the study of the environment and humanity, our species, as one single system rather than breaking them down separately. And that might not sound like a big deal to you, but when you study it as one whole, it actually has some interesting implications. It changes the way you see something. So with that in mind, holistic activism is the idea that rather than simply focusing our energy only on, you know, the economics or the politics or all these various debates, we look at every area of our life and ask ourselves, in which ways are we contributing to the problems that we see, okay? So we look at the whole system rather than the individual parts. So as activists, and I think everybody here could probably wear that label activist, and you know, we got to get past this idea that an activist is only the person holding the sign or the bullhorn. To me, activism is a way of life. It's in the conversations. It's in the way you communicate to people every day. You can, you know, implant ideas and plant seeds all day long by just having conversations. You don't ever have to hold a sign or host a podcast or write a book. You can just be an activist in the way you live and the example that you present to other people. So when we step into that role as activists, though, many of us, the first thing we do is we recognize something's wrong. Something doesn't feel right. I just watched a documentary, all of a sudden I know like the food's fucked up, or you know, whatever it is. You start paying attention to different issues, right? And you realize that there's a problem. That's like the first step. I see problems, and you start to identify the problem. Man, they're destroying the environment, they're poisoning the food, they're launching wars. You see all these different things, right? And then you do your research, and after a while you're able to identify the names and the people and the institutions behind the problem. You see, okay, so it's the government, oh, it's these corporations doing this, and you start to form a worldview, and you can get a perspective in. And I feel like many people, they stop there. They get it, they see what the problems are, and they either rage at them until they burn out, or they start seeking solutions, right? But what I feel is often missing, and what holistic activism asks us to do, is to look at those problems that we've identified, and those names, and those faces, and those institutions, and say, well, how am I contributing to that problem? So I'm going to give you 2 great examples of this that illustrate the need for the holistic perspective. I'm sure that March Against Monsanto was big out here in Philly, right? Because I mean, it's pretty much big all around the world, all around the country, and it seemed like a similar trajectory happened in each city. First one, like massive, all over the country, all over the world, real huge. The second one, like numbers went down a little bit. By the third one, it's like maybe dozens of people, like definitely not as much attendance. Like that's how it was in Houston. It seems to be kind of common around the country. And we participated, the Houston Freethinkers, we worked with March Against Monsanto Houston. Our main job and effort was to do is basically when they went to go to the mall area where they rallied and held their protest, we said, okay, when you guys are done with that, let's all go back and let's go to the Last Organic Outpost. It's an urban farm in Houston that we participated a lot in. And let's all learn how to grow our own food, right? Because that's the goal here, right? It wouldn't surprise you probably to know that of the 300-400 people that showed up at the action, we had less than a handful of people actually come learn, you know, something about gardening. Because we're just focused on reacting, we're focused on and when you think about it, you're letting these other people dictate your actions. Like, they're like, okay, well, let's do something that's going to offend them. And everybody flies all across the country to go to this one protest, and they spend money and time and energy, and then they go back home, right? And like, okay, then they get offended, they go this way. We're letting them control our actions. We're just reacting to them rather than being, okay, how can I be proactive? What steps can I take now rather than just waiting for them to guide me where they want me to go? So when you're looking at that situation, you have all these people, lots of new people came out. In our city, it was like lots of soccer moms. You had strollers out there and people who'd never been out, coming out for the first time because they're like, whether they're concerned about GMOs, they're concerned about the corporatism or the pesticides, everybody had their own thing that brought them there for this issue. And lots of new relationships, networking. It's a positive thing to get people out on the street. It definitely feels good the first time you go out there and you feel like, yeah, I'm getting out some frustration. But you got to get past that point and really, if we're going to be honest, assess our actions and say, okay, well, I've been to every march against Monsanto. It seems like that revolving door is still going around. I haven't seen the pesticides stop spreading. Monsanto still seems to keep growing. The GMOs are spreading. All these things are going on, and I'm not getting any closer to my goal. And asking yourself, like, okay, do I want to keep spending my energy this way, or perhaps is there a more direct route I can take? Because we're at the marches, we're at the rallies, we're all celebrating. Then everybody goes out for lunch afterwards to celebrate how great we did, and we're sitting there eating GMO chips, and we're eating food that's been sprayed with pesticides. We're feeding into the same Monsanto industrial complex. So obviously you can see, like, the goal and the action don't line up. Like, there's a separation there. Another great example, the Federal Reserve rallies all around the country, right? When I first started getting active in 2010, I helped out with the one in Houston, and I think we did it for 2 years, and after the third year, it was just like, man, we're spending money, and it's just like, what the fuck is the point of this, You had people spending thousands of dollars to build these big, and this was happening at all the Federal Reserve banks around the country, again, like showing unity, yeah, we're all uniting against the Fed, like, end the Fed, on the Fed, and they spend all this money to build a big stage, bring out a PA system, fly out speakers from around the country, set up vendors, so they could be out there and screaming and yelling, looking at the building like, you're going down, all this kind of stuff. And then everybody's getting rallied up, and then you're going over to the vendors and you see a nice End the Fed shirt, and you're like, I want to get one of those End the Fed shirts, and you pull out your Federal Reserve note and you pay for it. Like, okay, nobody here is noticing, like, we're all using the Federal Reserve note, like, this guy got paid with it. We're working against ourselves, right? You can't really, that's actually, I will say that those experiences did help me. It was the first time in the 2013 Federal Reserve rally in Houston. There was a buddy of mine who actually is one of the person who turned me on to a lot of these ideas. He gave a speech, and it was just so simple. Like, he was the first person to say, guys, like, if we want the Federal Reserve System to end, we have to stop using the Federal Reserve note. And at that time, it just became so clear to me. It was like, holy shit, like, yeah, like, you can't play with this and like think it's going to go away. Like, you don't keep playing with that system and it disappear tomorrow. So they're not going to audit it. They're not going to end it. The only way it's ever going to end is if we just stop supporting it. Again, back to the removing your financial and moral support away from that system. So two great examples, big movements, big action, march against Monsanto, but people aren't taking the steps to pull out from that system. So again, if we're going to assess our actions and be honest with ourselves, not me saying like, you're doing it wrong, but us as individuals deciding what are we willing to do to actually achieve these goals. Because for me, it's cool to go get invited to speak at these conferences, to do this national tour, and to meet people, but I actually want to achieve the change. I don't want to just kind of develop into like, cool, for the rest of my life I'll get invited to speak at places and we'll just talk about these things while we never actually get closer to the goals. We just kind of pat each other on the back for talking about these things. Like, no, I want to achieve the change, and it's going to take a lot of work, and I'm trying to do all my energy to change myself, to improve myself, and getting back to the holistic part, to make that come to fruition. So again, we have to look at the situations we see, we identify the problems, and then ask ourselves how are we contributing to that. So from a holistic perspective, this would include looking at the economy. We've talked about the Federal Reserve System, but it's not just what kind of currency you're using. This is why we promote Bitcoin, and it's not just Bitcoin either, cryptocurrency. Some people say, what's going to happen if the internet goes out or if the power goes out? I definitely think that's a possibility. This is something for a Freedom Cell to discuss. What do we do if the power goes out? What ideas should we plan for? Those are conversations you should be having, because we're having them down in Houston, and it's probably wise for all of us to be having them. But there's localized currencies, there's time banking, there's barter networks. The point is being able to exchange goods without supporting their system. But it also goes back to that old idea of purchasing power, where you spend your money, who you're supporting through these actions. So again, if you don't like the actions or the practices of a certain business, then vote with your Bitcoin or your dollar. Vote with your purchasing power and your energy. Don't give it to them. That would be a holistic perspective with the economy. When it comes to food, we're thinking not only the Monsanto stuff we've talked about, the pesticide industry and all these kind of things and the corporatism and all that, but for me, we also have to think holistically about the food production systems, which are completely unsustainable and are such a weak point that I think we're overlooking just in such a big way, because most of the food is being grown in California, Mexico, and other places. It's being shipped thousands of miles to get to our local grocery stores, to get to our plates. And as I said with the hurricanes and stuff, if those supply chains get knocked out, what's going to happen? Like all of a sudden, the people who have no backyard food, or there's no farmers market, there's no local agriculture. I mean, I don't know what that's going to look like, but it probably won't be pretty. This is why there's more and more of a move towards permaculture, towards localized agriculture, and getting people to, if you don't have a small little 4x4 backyard garden, or even a windowsill garden, or or supporting a CSA, community supported agriculture, or going and volunteering once a week, once a month at a community garden, urban farm, or if you can't do that, go at least get some of your produce from the farmers markets and the people who are growing it themselves, develop a relationship with them, get to know them, maybe go visit the farm. I mean, these are all steps, and you might be thinking like, I don't got the time for that, but you probably want your health and you probably want the environment, so I'd probably make some time for that because it's going to be important in the long run. So we have to look at that, like this is a weak point, a centralized system that depends on shipping things around the country, and if that breaks down, we're probably going to be in difficult situations. So from a holistic perspective, you might want to start thinking about that, like localized food production and how we can apply that, and I think freedom cells are a way to again spread that. So you got the economy, you got food production. Another great area that you can apply the holistic perspective that I've been thinking more and more about is energy, power itself. We're on their grid, the electricity grid. I mean, most of us are. I know that that's a big part in Houston that we're trying to focus on, is how can we as individuals start investing in our house to maybe even just get a couple of panels where we can reduce our electricity bill by a small percentage, and just start there and just start making the progress. Because not only is it like, okay, I'm dependent on them, but we know now they've been installing for years these smart meters, where they can remotely turn off your shit. It's like they could turn it off in a second if they chose to. And there's also people concerned about the health problems with the smart meters and all that stuff. But the point is, when you're part of their grid, you have no choice. They're going to force it on you one way or the other, and it's a problem. So thinking again about that localized food production, localized energy production, and trying to find ways to remove ourselves off that grid. And then when it comes to education, you're thinking holistically. Just beautiful example of decentralization. The internet has allowed so many of us to connect and share ideas and share knowledge. Who here has gone to YouTube and searched how to something, to troubleshoot something? Everybody, right? And all across the country, everybody's like, yeah, me. Because that's the beauty of this is we can't figure something out. We go search how to do it. Somebody else figured it out. They decided to film themselves and upload it on the internet for free because what? We want other people to learn, right? That's what we call YouTube University. That's just, it's just come along with the internet. As more people learn, and there's so much information you can learn, it's really like, it's right there for you. But there's also examples like the Khan Academy. Khan Academy, Khan, is K through 12 education, online education, not dependent on the state, decentralized education. There's also like a number of homeschooling and unschooling programs that you can find online from like different people, Ron Paul and others, and from some of the homeschoolers and peaceful parents that we've met on the tour, they tend to use like a combination of things. Like maybe they take the kids to go out on the museum or go out in nature and kind of do some unschooling stuff, and then they've got like some curriculum for like maybe math, and then so they're combining different areas again rather than centralizing and sending the kids to this one single place where they got to sit there all day like worker bees and have the state's version of history and health crammed into their heads. So thinking about education and decentralization. Another great example that I personally use is called edx.org, edx, and this is college classes, university classes taught by Harvard, Yale, Columbia, all kinds of universities around the country, completely for free. And I'm not talking about just like niche classes. Like I'm taking physics right now. I'm taking global muckraking. I've taken journalism for social change. There's just so many out there, and some of them you can pay a little bit extra if you want to get a certificate to prove you've done it, if you want to put that on your resume and for whatever purposes you need. But it's vastly more affordable than anything in a standard university. And I'm not trying to down anybody who's gone that route. I'm just saying we have options now these days to have a decentralized way to educate ourselves that doesn't have to be dependent on going into debt and relying on these people. So that's, these are just different areas that we're seeing this decentralized holistic concept come into play. And the last concept I want to share with you guys is, along with this holistic thing, in the last book, there's a section where John and I write, what is necessary, what is needed in order for this change, everything we've been discussing, to come into fruition, is for each individual to have an honest self-assessment of their actions. And so we wrote that, and I started reading it as we were on tour, and I started reflecting on it. When I read it, I wrote it, so I understand what I mean. I'm like, okay, of course that makes sense. But then I started thinking, well, maybe it's kind of vague. Maybe it's not descriptive enough. And what is that? What does a self-assessment look like? Somebody might just read that and kind of just move on with their life. So I started creating this self-assessment, and it's going to be, this is going to the next project I'm going to release. It'll probably be out in January. It's not going to be like a full-fledged book, maybe 10 to 12, 15 pages, but it's going to be a workbook that each person can write in, and I hope spend some quality time with, because it's for you. It's not for, homework, or it's all about you. And the process that this handbook is going to take people through is essentially the process that I took myself through when I was locked up in prison. Getting to know yourself on a deeper level, and again, starting to take this holistic assessment of your actions and asking, in which ways am I contributing to the problems? So that's going to be the next thing that will be out in January, sort of as a complement to the Manifesto of the Free Humans. And I'd like to share with you guys just the first 3 pages of this, because it's all in my head right now. We've been on tour, so I haven't put anything on paper yet. I've got scraps of notes everywhere, but most of it's up here right now. So I'd just like to share with you guys the first 3 pages. And this is something that's really big in the next project. This is actually what we're working on. This is what I want to do with you. So imagine this workbook, right? The first page says honest self-assessment. You open it up, and it says, who are you, right? And there's a space there for you to put first name, full name, nickname. What do you identify as yourself, right? And then we're gonna have like some notes on here to kind of guide people through this. But the basic thing, we'll ask you, spend some time describing the attributes and characteristics that you associate with yourself, and really think about it. When's the last time you stopped and really thought, like, who am I? Or somebody asked you that, who am I? Sometimes when we're asked that, we'll answer with our profession, like, oh, I'm a journalist. Oh, I'm a carpenter. I'm an electrician. Well, that's your profession. It's not necessarily who you are. It's a part of who you are. It's a characteristic, but it doesn't get at the root of who you are. When you start to answer this question and think about it, though, you might find, as some people do, that they associate who they are with external things, such as maybe you associate who you are with your relationship. Like, you feel like you're not whole without this partner, or with the job you have. If you lost this job, you just feel like you lose your identity, right? Or maybe you associate who you are with the money you have or don't have in the bank. And these are all, again, characteristics, attributes of your life, but they don't get at the root of who you are as a person. So this first step is probably going to be the most instrumental. Spend some time, really quality time. And again, this is meant for people who truly want to get at the root of these things and take some action. So you'll spend some time writing down all these attributes, what you associate with yourself. Do you have a negative view of yourself? Do you have a positive view of yourself? And spend some time on that. So then you turn the page. On the next page, you'll have a section that says goals. So a goal is an object that we want to possess. It's experience we want to have. It's something that we want to bring towards ourselves, right? So you would want to write down your short-term and your long-term goals. And you can divide it. Maybe this is professional goals, personal goals. It can be mundane, small things. Maybe the short-term goal is, you're trying to get this new job, or you're trying to get a new car, or you want to lose some weight. It can be simple things, again, professional, personal thing. Maybe long-term you're thinking, like, I want to get a land, I want to have a family, I want a homestead, I want to leave the world a better place than I found it. So big things, small things. Just spend some time on that. What are your short-term and long-term goals? Now below that, you'll have a section that says principles. Principles are supposed to be, our moral compass, something that guides us in our every action, something that you refer back to and use to guide you through your day. This is, for me, the self-ownership principle, the non-aggression principle that we've talked about. When I take an action, when I do anything in my life, I try to be conscious enough, mindful enough to refer back to that and ask, is this action going to cause harm to another person? Is there force involved in this? Is there violence involved in this? Is there coercion, And if so, okay, how can I go about this differently? How can I reroute myself? Like, what other path can I take? That's something that guides me in my daily actions. Also, something that comes from our indigenous communities, it's sometimes known as the 7th generation principle. Essentially just the basic idea that we're not just thinking in terms of what our actions today are going to do, but how they're going to affect our children or our friends' children and the generation after that, all the way up to the 7th generation and beyond. And when you really take that into consideration and it starts to become a regular practice, you start to think every day about your actions. And when you're going to pick up that water bottle, you're like, do I really need this water bottle? Okay, it's going to be waste once I finish it. That's just going to go in a landfill. You start to really just rethink a lot of things. At least that it has for me. It's caused me to question a lot of my actions, because I'm thinking I don't want to cause force, not only on other humans, but for me, I apply it to animals as well as the earth. And I'm thinking long term, not just about the present. Now, as you go through this process, you might find other principles that are important to you and that guide you, but I think those are really two just foundational principles: self-ownership and thinking long-term about the impact of our actions. So you spend some time getting to know that. What are the principles that motivate you? Because what we find, I think a lot of us have seen, that oftentimes people are so overworked, so tired, so distracted, or as I was illustrating earlier, they're so lost in their own emotional muck, as I was earlier, that they can't even figure out what a principle is. They're all over the place. They start looking at their actions and they're wishy-washy. They claim that they're for freedom, but then they want to use government against people if they don't, if they want to do this action. So they're all over the place. And when you're all over the place, you're not rooted in yourself. You don't know what principles guide you, what your goals are, what motivates you, all these important questions. It's very easy for politicians to come along every 2 to 4 to 8 years and make promises to you and say, all you got to do is just come this way, or no, come this way. And then, you're just back and forth. Again, you're letting outside forces guide you rather than being motivated by your own actions. So getting rooted in what principles you ascribe to, what's important to you, is extremely valuable. So then you would turn the page. So at the top of this third page, you would have your habits. Now your habits are everything from your daily routine, your vices. Just stop and think about, what do you do on a typical day from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep. And I think this will probably take some time too to really think about what are habitual things that I do. But this is where the real important, the critical work comes in, because you start looking at your habits, right? And you can identify those inconsistencies. So I'll give you an example. So you're laying out your habits and you're like, okay, well, I wake up, I have my morning coffee, or my morning cigarette, or my morning joint, or I stretch, do yoga. You're thinking about your routine. And you're thinking about how do you habitually talk to yourself. As I talked about earlier, I had some negative self-talk I had to unlearn. So you start thinking like, yeah, well, I tend to get frustrated every day on the way to work. I get stuck in the traffic, and you're just looking at all your behaviors, right? Now, when you get to this point, you have your habits, you're able to refer back to your goals and see where there's some separation. So for example, you wrote in your short-term goals, well, I want to lose some weight so I can go to the beach by the end of the summer and feel good about myself. Then you look at your habits, and your habits are, well, I sleep till 5 p.m. every single day, and I'm eating Hostess cakes and pizza all day long. You're probably never going to get that goal, right? And then you look at your long-term goal, it's like, well, I want to, end the Federal Reserve System, but then you look at your habits, like, oh, I'm using the Federal Reserve note. Oh, I want to end Monsanto, but then I'm using their products all day long. I want to save the environment, but then I'm still being very destructive in my personal habits. I'm being very wasteful, Or I want to create a world free of authoritarianism and coercion, but then I talk down to my spouse, or I talk down to my kids, or I talk down to myself. I'm being an authoritarian in my language and in my personal relationships. So you're able to start seeing these inconsistencies. My goal is that through this process, people will be motivated to see like, wow, holy crap, like I've claimed that I'm for freedom and that I want to do all these lofty things, but when I'm looking at my actual actions, well, there is no action. It's just all talk, or my actions don't align with my stated goals. So that presents an opportunity for change. It shouldn't be like, damn, I'm going to be hard on myself. It should be an opportunity to say, okay, that means I can change it. Because that's the way I see these things.